And today's guest is Kim Page. She's with the group Parents Helping Children. And if you wish to reach her about a case after you've heard her story, you might want to reach out. It's DHRJusticeAlabama.com. And her number for work-related issues is 205-602-5946. And Kim Page, I was really excited to be introduced to you a while back, and you're someone who's quite the activist. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell our listeners what your work is and how you operate, just to introduce yourself a little bit to everyone.
Sure. Yes, I definitely can. One thing though, it's DHRJusticeAlabama@gmail.com. Not a website. That's my email address.
Sorry.
That's okay. As you said, my name is Kim Page. I am a child protective services victims rights advocate. I'm a legal advocate. What I do is I advocate for parents when their children are illegally removed by Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services, as the Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals have said, is the world's largest supplier of children into sex trafficking. The P. Diddy parties, CPS is responsible for the children being supplied to those parties. The parties in Hollywood with all the actors that are the Pizzagate, things like that. None of that is fictional. It is actually true. And Child Protective Services supplies those children to those parties and to those abuse situations. So what I do as an advocate is I help parents to understand the legal part of what's going on in their case. If they're fortunate enough to be able to get an attorney, they generally have no idea what's going on. Whether they have a good attorney, they have a crap attorney, they still don't understand what's going on because attorneys tend to speak to people in legalese. So they tend to speak to their clients in such a way that their clients don't understand what's going on. So part of my role is I will translate into English so they can understand what's going on. In addition to that, I will teach parents, should they choose not to have an attorney, I will teach them how to actually fight their own case. I will teach them the steps of how to do the research, to be able to file the filings they need to file, to be able to argue specific points, what type of case law is going to work in family court versus stuff that isn't. I teach the parents how to locate if CPS says, well, you're going to need to do drug testing or parenting classes or anger management. I teach the parents how to find a legit facility which is not in cahoots with CPS to be able to get these services done, so that they actually get a actual real evaluation. They get testing that's done without somebody sliding money under the table to have the drug testing come up positive when it wasn't positive. I help them in pretty much any aspect of the case to be able to get their children home.
And these issues have become really popular, you might say it's the wrong word, but famous of late because of the P. Diddy arrests. So there's more awareness that as you see the video footage that continues to be released, these kids were being set up and they're being disappeared and then being sent into situations that are really awful. And you see some of the grown up, if they've grown up, if they escaped that, they're now telling their stories out loud. So where does parental rights stand in all of this? If they come knocking on your door, how is it possible to say no to the authorities at that point so that your kid doesn't get taken away from you or put into an unsafe situation? What is there something parents can do right away to block the authorities from removing their kids from the home? Or should you?
The first thing, Wes, that parents need to understand is CPS is not the authorities. CPS is not a government agency. CPS is a private for-profit business that administers government policy.
What?
So break that down into legal, into layman's terms, that means that they are essentially Walmart that's got a contract with the government to do whatever a law says for them to do. So that they administer government policy, but they are not an actual government agency. They
It's like a
are.
business.
They are. They very much are a business.
They're
In
contracted with the
Alabama,
government. Yeah.
Alabama Child Protective Services has 197 stakeholders. Now, Wes, I know you know what a stakeholder is. A
Yes.
stakeholder is a person that actually invests in a business with the intent of getting a profit. So, there a CPS
Like a private
across
military force, like
exactly.
a private military or a corporation that is providing services to the Department of Homeland Security, making a lot of money on contracts, or famously now, there's a bunch of these groups where government decided to privatize all these functions of government. So we assume that it's a branch of the government or they're under administrative control, but it's a bit like the prisons. Who imagined that the prisons would be privatized so that judges would have an interest in pipelining people into the prison system? Anyway, back to you, ma'am. So that's an amazing reveal for me. I don't think
It's
most people know that.
Yep, most people do not know that. They believe that CPS is a government agency. Alabama has 14 judges that are stakeholders in Alabama CPS. There's attorneys. There's also doctors. These doctors are generally what are referred to as child abuse pediatricians. They get this title because they're the ones that CPS sends the children to have a determination that the children are being abused. When there is no specific medical training to determine the method of injury. So if I come to you and you're a doctor and I've got a bruise on my arm, as a child abuse pediatrician, your job for CPS to say, oh my gosh, well, this bruise, we know with 1,000,000% certainty that happened because the child's mother twisted the child's arm and broke the child's arm. Doesn't matter even if I've got a video of showing my child falling off a slide while they were at school and breaking their arm. The child abuse pediatrician says mom did it, so mom did it, even though there is no way to determine the way that the injury actually happened. The method of injury is one thing, but the actual cause is something different. And these child abuse pediatricians will often say that they can say without a shadow of a doubt that the injury was caused by XYZ person. And 99.9% of the time, they are absolutely wrong. But they're wrong and they're listened to because they are either stakeholders for CPS or they are one of their business partners who profits from making these statements about children. For example, there's a young woman in Alabama. She lived in Mobile, which is right on the border of Florida and Alabama. She has a lot of health issues herself, and these are severe, severe issues. One of her issues is actually referred to as bubble boy syndrome. It's a autoimmune issue that keeps her body from being able to fight on its own, to be able to fight off infection, similar to the way they work. Um, and so, uh, oftentimes, people who have this illness will have to be put into isolation for many, 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 many years. Well, she has two boys, and they both inherited the gene for this. One of her boys ended up with a serious situation that required him to have brain surgery. When he had brain surgery, the doctor left him in a situation where he started becoming or showing signs of an infection in the surgical site. She went to the nurses and she went to the doctor. He's got infection. You can see the pus. You can see the green. You can see that this is infection. And they ended up um, bringing in CPS and accused this mother of Munchausen syndrome, which
Whoa.
is where
Yeah. Go
which
ahead.
is where
It's
it carries
Munchausen
influence.
syndrome, or Munchausen syndrome by proxy, I suppose, in this case.
Correct.
Fascinating. Go
Yes.
ahead and talk about that.
So they accused her. Munchausen syndrome is, um, what was the little girl's name? Gypsy, the young lady that killed her mother. Her mother had Munchausen syndrome. If you watched the movie Signs years ago, the little girl who talked to the little boy and showed the video of her mom pouring cleaner into her soup. That's Munchausen syndrome. So, Munchausen syndrome is a psychological disorder. Now, I'm not a psychologist, so this is just my understanding from the way that I've researched things. It is a psychological disorder, and it is characterized by a caregiver who will intentionally inflict harm on their patient or the person that they're in care of, and they will do that so that they can get sympathy. Oh, mom, I'm so sorry. Your child has cancer. Poor mom. Oh, dad, I'm sorry. Your child has Down syndrome. Poor dad. You're such a great parent for caring for this child. You're such a
Typically
great
with
daughter
boys,
for caring for your mom.
with male children, it manifests in ADHD syndromes where the mother will project an issue onto the boy so that he gets put on Ritalin, but the issues are something else regarding their personal relationship. But it's a strange sort of a revenge and a death wish to throw Munchausen onto your child, male or female. And then in some cases, people do it with their pets. They do it with their cat or their dog so that they're always running to the vet, and then they have something to talk about, with friends and so forth. But yeah, Munchausen you might enjoy the movie Baron von Munchausen, or the word comes from it was an old German play. I think Baron von Munchausen was initially some play. It might have been by Goethe or something, but it's a comedy in a sense, but it's a tragic comedy. So that's the intake. Do you want to tell us some more about that case of Baron von Munchausen syndrome, or by proxy a little more? I'm sorry.
So, so the mother, before her son had brain surgery, um, they had genetic testing done on both of the children, and the genetic testing showed that they had the illnesses that the mother had. But because this mother dared defy or stand up to this doctor, which enraged him because he was being questioned on, his God complex was questioned.
Right.
He decided to get revenge on the mother by contacting CPS, and
Wow.
CPS was brought in, and they actually had pediatric experts, child abuse experts come in and testify against this woman to show that she had actually abused her children and these illnesses were related to her children. The thing was is the child abuse expert that came in and testified against her never saw her child ever. Never met her, never met her children. Just started writing a bunch of stuff in there. Whenever they looked at the child's chart that this doctor had wrote notes in, the doctor didn't have the child's age right. The doctor didn't have the child's race right. But this doctor was testifying under penalty of perjury that she knew without a shadow of a doubt that this mother had abused her children. And it took this mother 2.5 years to be able to get CPS to place her children with her mother. And actually, about a month ago, she contacted me and said CPS is back, because when CPS gets their claws into a child, they're like a dog on a bone. They don't want that bone taken away from them, and they will harass you. She actually found out that there's been a guy that's stalking them, and she's seen this guy multiple times. He's pulled her over claiming to be a police officer. However, she ended up seeing this man and he revealed himself as actually a CPS worker. So they've
Wow.
got these CPS workers that when a child is returned to their parents, they are actually assigned to stalk the parents so that they can set the parents up for any kind of situation that might look like the child should be removed.
Is there any way to find out the ownership of these companies of child protection services? If we have like local branches, can we like easily discover who are the investors in that? It reminds me a lot of the affordable housing scheme too, where the investors or the builders are actually politicians or families of people that are passing the affordable housing. That way the tax dollars are streamed right into the wealthy builders or wealthy real estate agents' pockets. The investors are tied up with affordable housing, what they call, what we normally know of as government projects, pack them and stack them high rise population density buildings where they have everybody, inside a 15-minute city. But is there some way we can find out who owns, like we can ever hope to know who is tied up, who's a so-called stakeholder in child protective services? I don't know.
So I'm actually Googling that right now to see what it says for Minnesota. In Alabama, Child Protective Services has a stakeholder meeting twice a year. And when they have their stakeholder meetings, those are legally supposed to be made public record. And the stakeholders are listed as the people who attended the meeting. Um, so just a quick Google search for Minnesota um, stakeholders. AI came out with stakeholders in Minnesota's child welfare system include children and families. It says these stakeholders are especially important because of their experience with the system. Um, it says that these agencies include county human services agencies, which primarily administer child protection services in Minnesota.
Huh.
Um, it doesn't give me on a quick search
Yeah.
who the actual stakeholders are for CPS in Minnesota. However, we can it is in most states there is a way to find that out.
Yeah.
Um, just
I'm sure
takes
by
it just takes a little bit of research.
Yeah, I'm sure it could be done. It's just a fascinating line of research, and maybe there's a listener out there. In fact, I know a couple of activists in this area who might be interested in taking that up because they're all about parental rights. The parental rights in Minnesota are coming under attack with bills such as House File 4393, which was passed. That's a House file that allows boys and girls to be in the same locker rooms, showers, bathrooms, bedrooms on school trips, and sports teams. And then it's a privacy act that protects, they say, student privacy. And then there's also a move now through the school systems to allow school teachers to discuss sexual matters with very young children. And if the children express a desire in becoming trans, the school authorities can keep that a secret from the parents so that if they've found someone who wants to transition, their gender and become like a girl wants to become a boy and cut her breasts off at a certain age, Mayo Clinic has a facility for that. Mayo Clinic also has a facility for cutting off the penis and the scrotum, removing the testicles if a boy wishes to transfer into a girl at a certain age. So these kind of sterilization practices are well underway in Minnesota because um, uh, the Democrats have passed a bill that says insurance companies must comply with what they call gender affirming surgery. So the gender affirming surgery is going to, it doesn't, I mean, without editorializing it, it really doesn't cure anything. It doesn't solve a problem. It sterilizes people and then removes their ability to experience an orgasm, and it removes their ability to reproduce. So it's a really bizarre practice, but it's a huge industry. So the stakeholders So one marketer estimates that within a 10-year period of time, it's going to be a $10 billion per year activity. So insurance companies and our premiums will be paying for these gender affirming care. Mayo Clinic has a special branch. And so now we're becoming a state where people are flocking here to have the surgery. But that's another cake. So if the school officials are able to talk with young children about um, sexual matters and sexual issues and proclivities and what the kids are interested in, is that something where very quickly kids could be absconded with into the system? I mean, is there going to be any issue if Child Protective Services wants to swoop in and carry somebody away from their parent or prevent?
There have been situations where children are being removed from their parents because the parents refuse to entertain this ridiculousness of, I'm a boy and I want to cut my penis off at 7 years old. The parents don't want to entertain that because they know it's BS, and they know that, children are impressionable, and they say, no, you don't, and we're not going to do that. And then they go back to school and they say, well, Miss Teacher, my mommy said that I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, and that I don't need you want to cut off my penis. And so teacher calls CPS, and CPS knocks at mom and dad's door. So
yeah,
what mom and dad at that point, one of the things that CPS does, and this is a huge thing across the board, whether it's CPS or even with our prison systems, the people that are targeted with those kind of situations are those who can't afford an attorney. And when they do have an attorney, it's an appointed attorney. And as everybody knows, just from watching TV, court appointed attorneys are not worth their weight in spit. They are absolutely just worthless. But the reason for that is a couple of reasons. You may have a really good attorney that wants to help you. The problem is in the fact that they are licensed by the State Bar Association. When an attorney gets a license to practice law from the state that they're in, they pledge an oath under the bar licensing to put the court first and everyone else later. So when they come in, if they fight for their client, and fighting for their client is going to be negative against whatever profit the court is going to make, they'll lose their job. They will stop getting court-appointed cases given to them. They will have judges retaliate against them and rule against them in other cases. Even oftentimes, they'll actually have CPS come get their children. I've seen it happen with several attorneys that their children will be taken by CPS in retaliation for it. So parents are put in a situation where, number one, they can't afford an attorney, and that's majority of who's targeted by Child Protective Services. Because if you can't afford an attorney, then that's going to scare Child Protective Services, because there are a few out there, few and far between, that will stand up to CPS. At the very beginning, they will. Towards the end, you'll find that even the best attorney is going to say, I'm sorry, I can't continue to help because they're coming after me now. So, you asked earlier what a parent can do to keep Child Protective Services from taking their children. The first thing is, as I said earlier, is they have to understand that Child Protective Services is not a government agency.
Yeah.
In order for Child Protective Services to take your child, Wes, they are required, just like I am, to come take your child. If I wanted your child, I would have to go to court, and I would have to get a court order that would allow me to come get your child. Child Protective Services is required to do the same thing. Without a court order, they're not allowed to take your child, except for under exigent circumstances. Now, here's the problem with exigent circumstances. There is no legal definition across this country, not in any state, not federally, as to what exigent circumstances actually means or what imminent danger actually means. It's subjective. So if I, as a CPS worker, came to your home and I determined that your child was in imminent danger of abuse because you've got dishes piled up in your sink, then I can take your child.
Well, I would be guilty
You,
of that, definitely. I-
you
Today, in
well,
fact, right?
I've
Yeah.
seen it. I've actually seen it done. There was actually a mother that I spoke to. She had a new baby. I believe the baby was about 3 weeks old, and she had a first grader and excuse me, it was second grader and a kindergartner. And as a new mother, she's exhausted. And so some things are going to be, she's not going to die on every hill that she may have died on before the baby was born.
Sure.
Well, her kindergartner wanted to dress herself for school one day. So mom said, okay, whatever, go ahead, dress whatever you want to dress. And the child decided that she wanted to pick out her own socks. She did not want socks that matched. She wanted two different socks. Mom said, fine, whatever, you're dressed. You're
What a smart little girl.
very, very
Yeah.
smart little girl,
Yeah.
except for CPS. CPS took her and her
Great.
siblings from her
Oh,
parents
oh,
because she wore mixed match socks to school.
because it shows inappropriate dress. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Because yeah, in cold weather, the child should wear a parka or something, that's warm, or boots if it's raining or whatnot. But to demonstrate a little bit of independence by having the socks on, to be not matching. Oh boy, good thing nobody looks at my feet every day. Actually, I threw away all my socks that are different, so I didn't have to sort them and match them anymore. So I just have one color. So this is a
Well,
lot of.
in this particular case, Child Protective Services called it neglect. They said that the child was wearing clothes that did not match, were not color coordinated properly because the mother was neglecting her children.
It's funny, in Minnesota, you could get in a lot of trouble, like if you disciplined your kid in a Sam's Club parking lot or something. But if you're gonna talk to children about cutting off their genitals, other people's children about cutting off their genitals, that's just fine. It just shows you
Hmm.
how upside down everything is, that you'll get in more trouble for, like, maybe swatting your kid a little bit in a Walmart. Whereas if you engage in female genital mutilation, that's just freedom of religion. So we've,
Right.
like, strange place. So there's a lot of money tied up in this, I imagine. There's a lot of money because I know some people who did this before. Just talking to them casually, I figured out that they were just getting thousands of dollars for the kids that they were taking in. And it was just like, some of these people have a house full of kids, and I'm not sure they're coping very well with the like, some of them will just take on more and more kids, and then they'll get a bigger house. And then they got a bunch of kids in their house that aren't related to each other. And I mean, I know one representative who sort of lives that way. She has a couple kids of her own, but she's got just a house full of kids. And it seems like, hey, that would lead to issues. But, especially if you're a Minnesota state representative, you might not want to have all that chaos and trouble. But how much money are we talking about, like, per child? Like in Minnesota, is there a pay scale range? Is there a, like, how much money are the people, out of the goodness of their hearts, they're taking in all these kids, and we're led to believe like they're big-hearted people. Like, but what are they? What do you get? What's the bottom line? What's a child worth to Child Protective
The
Services?
the
Oh,
national average.
versus what the
Go ahead.
parent. Yeah. So there's two levels. Like, the funding's this, and then the CPS gets a cut, and then what do the parents get? So sorry.
So the national average in 2022 for a foster parent, we actually refer to them affectionately as foster jailers. They receive, as of 22, they would receive $28 per day per child in their care and custody. so long as that child did not have any qualifying disabilities. Okay. If
Okay.
that child had qualifying disabilities, they would get an additional stipend. And that additional stipend could be anywhere from $10 to $50 per day, depending on the level of disability of the child. CPS will take, at the moment they get their hands on a child, they immediately get the child in to see a doctor and a psychologist, because some of their funding is determined based on whether or not that child qualifies for Social Security disability. I know a woman who adopted, she and her ex-girlfriend adopted 8 children out of foster care in Hennepin County. They 8 children. Mhm. At one point, they had 12 children in their that were with them.
That's
8 of them were actually
$10,000
adopted.
a month.
She actually gets, because all of these children have different levels of disability, she gets a little over $15,000 a month for these children. But these 8 children were adopted. These children were adopted. They're no longer foster children, Wes. They are
That's
now her legal responsibility.
That's evil. That's $180,000 a year for having 12 kids living together in a house.
Yep. Yep.
That's
And
insane.
she also has the state pay for PCAs, personal care assistants. These are people that basically come in to help her with the kids. So this is the money that she gets, and she has adopted these children. These children are legally her responsibility. They're no longer foster children, and she will get this money until the day the children reach age of majority in Minnesota. And if their illness, if their disability is qualifying, she will actually receive that fund for the life of the child, depending on the level of disability.
So this is crazy, because if that parent, if the actual mother and father had received that benefit themselves, they might not be under such a hardship where they would end up losing their child to a person who's going to rake in $180,000 a year. Like, who knows what level of assistance might have been enough for the mother to get back on her feet, or whatever her situation is, the actual mother. But it's more profitable in terms of tax dollars to take those kids out and put them with a foster care situation, so that that foster mother or father can make some money. And it's, it goes to the heart of, there may be some very good-hearted people involved in this, right? There may be some people that have the right motivation, right? But there's certainly going to be some people that have the wrong motivation too, and they got their eyes on the prize, and they look big-hearted while they're doing it too, because they took in a foster kid. I don't want to rip on everybody like across the board, but there's clearly a profit motive here.
There is. And you say that there's people that do this for the right reason, and I would say that probably about 70% of people do go into foster care for the right reason. But CPS will lie to these foster parents, and they will tell them, okay, Miss Foster Parent, we're going to give you little Bobby. Little Bobby was physically abused and sexually abused by his drug addict mother. But what's actually going on is mom has never been on drugs. She's never abused her child. In the court case, she's not accused of any of this stuff. And the reason they took him is because her car broke down. She lost her job and she was evicted from her apartment. So they took her child from her, placed her child with a foster parent, told the foster parent she's a drug addict, sexually abusing her child. But the court case says you just don't have the financial ability to care for your child. So what happens is the foster parents believe that they are the best thing for this child because we're protecting this poor abused child. And what they end up doing is they start talking to this child about how badly he was abused and how much his mother doesn't love him. And they turn the child against their biological parents. when in actuality, the only crime was she's poor.
And they're spreading shame on another. That child will experience that shame of feeling that what they were told. I mean, if law enforcement did this, it must be true. If CPS did this, it must be true. If my foster parents, and they're the ones feeding me, tell me this, it's got to be true, because all the authorities are saying to them, oh, this is the narrative, right? It carries the narrative of abuse, and that child feels the shame as they go on in life. And maybe that wasn't the case exactly, you know?
Mhm.
So you see a lot of these situations. Is there hope for finding some way of creating some management of the issues so that the truth can be told, and that um, these disasters don't end up being a financial benefit to anyone? How do we turn it around so it becomes good? It seems.
So the financial incentive for Child Protective Services to do what they're doing was actually let me just back up just a little bit. Child Protective Services. I had a conversation with a very high level FBI agent a few years back, and made a comment that, it just seems that Child Protective Services was actually designed to do this. And he actually said they were. That's exactly why they were created, was to traffic children. So back in the reason that it became such a money making system was because of our good friends Bill and Hillary Clinton. In
Oh, good.
1997, Bill Clinton passed a executive order called the Adoption Safe Families Act. Now, on the surface, now, Wes, you've looked at bills, you've seen the tens and thousands of pages, and it looks like it's going to be fantastic for us. But way in there on page 9,212, you don't see this one little paragraph that says, by the way, if you pass this bill, you are saying that we get to come into your home and cut off your ring finger, and we're allowed to wear it as a necklace. You have no idea that that's what you're signing by voting for this bill. So with the Adoption Safe Families Act, it was on the surface, it was meant to help children who've been languishing in the system to find permanency, to be permanently uh, severed from their biological parents, who actually
Oh,
do need to be severed from, and be
oh,
adopted by a family that actually loves them. But what it ended up doing in that 1,000th page is it actually made it to where when Child Protective Services removes a child from their parents, if they place that child with a stranger, for each child that is placed with a stranger, Child Protective Services gets a profit of between $4,000 and $6,000 per month.
what?
Now, where does this money come from, Wes? It comes from the Social Security Fund.
Oh.
Title
Just
4E funding
Oh, Lord.
moved from the Social Security Fund. In addition to the 4 to 6,000. Now, the reason it's $4 to 6,000 is, like I said about this mother, the adopted mother in Hennepin County. Her children are all disabled. So, if a child meets the guidelines, the Social Security guidelines for disability, then CPS gets the $6,000. They get the additional $2,000 per month. That's why they take every single child for a psychological evaluation and a medical evaluation within the first 72 hours of taking the child, so they can get a disability diagnosis for the child. In
Oh,
addition, in addition to this, Wes, when a parent has private insurance on their child and their child's taken, CPS will force that parent to let the child be on Medicaid, because when that child is on Medicaid, CPS can bill Medicaid for every single thing that they do in relation to the child. And I
oh,
don't mean doctor's appointments and dentist appointments. I mean, if the Child Protective Services worker goes to the parent's home, boom, Medicaid gets a bill. They go to court, boom, Medicaid gets a bill. They write an email about the child, boom, Medicaid gets a bill. And they end up getting roughly an additional $4,000 to $6,000 per month per child from Medicaid. But I'm not done, Wes. I'm not done. Via Title 4, Title 4D. Title 4D is the federal bill that governs child support. So when a child is removed from their parents, CPS immediately starts child support proceedings against that parent.
Oh, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
They go after the parent for child support. But the numbers, Wes, if you and I had a child and we got divorced and I wanted child support from you, the formula that they would use is going to give me approximately 17% of your income to help take care of the child. They don't use that same formula when the child's in Child Protective Services. Often the parents are forced to pay upwards of 70% of their income to Child Protective Services.
And then they administer, so they actually insert themselves in between the parents' funding and the child so that the child doesn't receive the benefit of the parent's value that the parent is offering over, which is why I'd say if you and I had a kid and we got divorced, I would just give you a bag of cash every month and say, here you go, sweetie, do right by our kid. You know, people
and
who get
important that parents don't get married. Don't bring the government into your life, because when you sign that document, it's now me, you, and the government, and they get a say in everything we do. So they get to decide.
They created a different kind of marriage, which is just a common law marriage. So that the common law marriage snaps in automatically, so the state can still get their foot in the door if there's a dissolution of a common law marriage. I mean, this is a benefit. How they've destroyed our nuclear families, which seems to be the intent. Like going back to that conversation with the FBI agent, I'd like to, if you wouldn't mind sharing more about that, because I think we're onto something really big here. That is the plan to actually disrupt the transfer of culture from one generation to another. By disrupting the family unit, you have disrupted the base, or the base root of our civilization should be based in a family unit that has a stable economic and partnership aspect. That's the last family unit, that's the last societal agreement that people have between themselves that the government doesn't yet have control of. Everything else is in the government's realm. Like there's no private space left anymore. Everything's corporatized, or it's under the control of the government. But you're showing this profit motive to disrupt family relationships, and a profit motive to deliberately cause situations, maybe go so far as to creating false medical records, creating maybe false court documents that result in the destruction of relationships, interpersonal relationships. And some of those are negative and some of those are really wonderful. But if people always have hanging over their heads the threat of, well, honey, if you don't do things my way, then I'm going to call the authorities. Or if you don't serve me properly in the house, I'm going to just cast you out or something. There's all kinds of reasons that people play games with relationships. But the government now has this incentive to get involved. It's weird. So I'm shocked.
And their goal is to divide the family. We're called the United States of America, but we have never been more divided at our root. At our roots, we are more divided now than ever. When Child Protective Services comes in, they often will tell the parents, you have to get a divorce before we will consider giving you your child back. You could have a very happily married mother and father, and they're fighting together and they're united, But Child Protective Services will say, "Hey, Bob, listen, we need to talk to you about Sally. We really think that you should have the kids, but we just can't give the kids back as long as you and Sally are together." They'll go to Sally and say, "Sally, look, we're really concerned about some things going on with Bob here, and we want you to have your kids back, but as long as you're married and living with Bob, we're not going to be able to do that."
So it's
But what
similar
that also gives them
there.
the ability to do is it also gives them the ability, once Bob and Sally are no longer married, Bob and Sally are no longer one. So Bob and Sally are now two. That means that's an additional child support case.
Right. So they double their
So
caseload and they double their income. And then also saying to the mother or the father, if you have custody, you're going to get this much money. If you're single, you're going to get this, or you'll get this much money if you're still married. So they're doing this to elderly couples too. This is a little off topic, but old folks that are looking at going into nursing homes are being advised, and sometimes they're a Catholic couple and they've been married 55 years or something, or they're very Christian people, or they love living together, but have them get a state divorce and then put them in separate nursing homes, and that way they get higher funding levels for each one. It's everything is just nuts about this when you incentivize the dissolution of families. It's crazy.
well, if you look at your taxes, your W-2, it asks you, are you filing married, or are you doing it a single at a higher rate? You get more taxes if you file your taxes as a single person instead of as a married couple, because
Right.
it's not about we have no foundation of family when it comes to the perspective of the government. The foundation of family it's an illusion. It is very much an illusion to help to destroy the family. And then what ends up happening is, I think the last time I checked, I haven't looked at these numbers in a while, but the last time I checked, it was roughly about 70% of children who were foster children wind up with some sort of criminal record. And I think it was 43% of those they grew up in foster in the prison system itself. So
Yeah.
what happens when you're in foster care, you grow up, you have children of your own, and then because you weren't taught properly, you end up in the prison system. You have a child. Where does your child go?
Prison
Into foster care. I
foster
have
care.
a foster
Our line
care.
is breaking up a
When she
little
was
bit.
13
Say,
Can you hear me?
so our line now I just did, but what if our line is breaking up. What if we end this segment and come back with a part two and take a quick break and we'll come back? Is that good, Kim? So at my end, at least, I don't hear you. So I'm gonna stop recording and we'll try a part two.